there's a very large selection in 1942, December 6, 1942, in Auschwitz. Selections are when they lined prisoners up and they did go to the gas, go to camp, and they selected them for death. They killed 10,000 women. The women, the girls, they were all naked. They stood outside naked for 12 hours.
Heather Dune Macadam, welcome to CNN News 18.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Heather, the documentary 999, The Forgotten Girls, will be screened at this year's Red Lorry Film Festival. It's directed by you. This festival, of course, will be held in Mumbai and Hyderabad between March 21st and 23rd. The film, of course, reveals the hidden story of 999 unmarried young Jewish women who were registered for the government service in a supposed shoe factory and ended up in Auschwitz, which is now it was a Nazi concentration camp. What are you hoping the audience will take away when the film will be screened here in India?
I it's a tough subject, but I'm really interested in creating a story, telling a story, that is inspiring, that speaks to women's and girls' rights, as well as our importance on the planet, um, and and is I do a lot of work with teenagers in America and going around to schools, and I feel that these women are such great role models for young people today, but also just for everybody. They go through so much, but they work together, even as teenage girls. They realize that they have to. It's a sorority of survival that they discover. And while not all of them can survive or do survive, those who do survive tell us this incredible story about their friends, their sisters, their cousins, and how they helped each other survive.
How has been the response to the film when it was screened at other film festivals? It has been also winning many awards.
Yeah, it's been really exciting. Audiences really do connect with these women, and even though they're 90 in their 90s when I spoke with them, there's a teenage girl inside of them, just like there's a teenage boy inside of you. We may look older, but there is that teenage self inside of us, and I think that we connect to these women in a very, very personal way. I think one of the things that audiences really connect to is that this is a multiple narrative story. So it's not just one person's perspective, where I weave together these stories in a tapestry to tell you about the transport, but also about 1942 Auschwitz women's camp, which nobody has researched or really looked at until I came along and took it on as my mission in life.
So then, like you said, nobody knows about this story, or not many people know about this story. Then, how did you come across the story of this 999 girls who made up the official transport of Jews to Auschwitz?
So I was an undergraduate, and I learned about a woman who wanted to tell her story. And I've got to move my her book was Rena's Promise, and I wrote that as an undergraduate. And Rena was on the first transport, and I couldn't believe that I'd never heard about it. And I went into the archives at my university, and sure enough, I found evidence that it was true. So we wrote her story. It came out in the 90s, and then I was living in Europe, and I realized that it was the 70th anniversary of the first transport, and I could get to Slovakia super easy. It's not easy from America, but from Europe, Ryanair, EasyJet, it was like $14 to get to Slovakia. And I decided I would go as in honor of Rena. And I got to this little town underneath the mountains, the high Tatras of Slovakia. It's called Poprod. And I discovered that there was a plaque at the train station, and there were ceremonies. The Prime Minister of Slovakia was there, and there was also another survivor. And I didn't know anybody was still alive from the first transport. And that's Edith. Edith was 92 at the time. She lived in Toronto. I live in New York. I like to joke that it takes me longer to get to the airport than it does to fly to Toronto. And I began to work with Edith, and Edith had a different story from Rena. And Edith was on the transport with all of her schoolmates and her 200 girls from her town, and we're talking mostly teenagers, right? Like the government lies and says you have to volunteer for work, government service. So all of these young girls go, oh, this will be really great, we're going to make money for our families, we're going to help our families. So most of them voluntarily go, and they end up in Auschwitz, and Edith is there with a bunch of her friends that she grew up with. So her story is super, super different from Rena, who was hiding in Slovakia as a refugee, and she was Polish. So I had this amazing dramatic arc of multiple narratives, and then I met other survivors who had stories to tell, and that's how I wove it together. And I was just really interested in telling the story of the transport, not just one girl. And Edith said to me, God bless her, she said, we were all on it, so why wouldn't we tell all of our stories? And that gave me permission to do this, huge 450-page book. There it is. And it's come out in 19 languages.
Sure.
Now it's a movie.
Yes, but the film, of course, will be screened at the Red Lorry Film Festival here in Mumbai. As a filmmaker yourself, which are some of the other films that you are looking forward to watch at the festival? They're screening Emilia Perez, which is the front runner for the Oscars.
Yeah, I gotta say, I really loved Amelia Perez. I saw it here. I mean, I would love to come to the festival. Whatever is going to be screening online, I will, I'm not even sure if you're screening things online. So, it's hard. My nephew does live in Mumbai, so he does know about the festival. I'm really excited I think you've got a great lineup. It's really exciting, and it's a real honor to be part of that lineup for sure.
Your nephew, of course, is part of series like Betaal, and his name is Patrick Graham.
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
you familiar then with Indian cinema or with Bollywood movies?
I see that I'm familiar with the ones that Patrick's done, and I'm familiar with what comes to America. Yeah. I mean, listen, I love to dance, so any movie that's got dancing. I look like a Holocaust survivor, so I should be very serious, but I'm a big dancer, and I love salsa, and I love any way to express myself movement wise. So I love movies that do that.
Uh, is there a Bollywood film that comes to your mind right now, the one you love the most or enjoy dancing to?
Oh, I love Slumdog Millionaire. I just thought it was brilliant. I mean, it just, I read the book. I love the book. And it certainly made it here. I loved the ending of that film with everybody dancing in the subway. It just was,
Jai Ho was the song by A.R. Rahman.
yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Now, coming back to your film, what was most surprising things you learned in your research?
Mm. Well, it's tough to say. Um, so in selections, they they selections are when they lined prisoners up, and they did go to the gas, go to camp, right? It was actually the other way around. Um, and they selected them for death. That's why it's called a selection. And working with Rena many years ago, she told me about incredibly horrible selections, and I, I wrote about them. I didn't discover until I was working on the book um, that the women, the girls, they were all naked. They stood outside naked for 12 hours, sometimes in the snow. And and what I always say, you know, when you're working with a trauma survivor, what they tell you is super important, but what they don't tell you is also just as important. And that I worked with Rena for 2 years and she never told me the selections were naked, they were naked, tells me how horrible it was, how shaming, how embarrassing, and how she just didn't want to talk about it. And so by not telling me, she avoided talking about it. And when I listened to a testimony on the USC Shoah Foundation, there's a bunch of testimonies, and I use them in the film as well as my own interviews. Um, one of the women says, you know, we were naked. Nobody was embarrassed. Everybody was naked. And I called Edith up and I went, Edith, you were naked in selections? And she goes, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that. And I was like, you know, it was mind blowing to me. And also, you know, one of the things that my research divulges is that there's a very large selection in 1942, December 6, 1942, in Auschwitz, and the SS records. So there's a huge book, I've got it around here someplace, um, that is the day-to-day workings of Auschwitz. How many people were killed, what transports came in, what numbers, you know, very, very accurate, you would think. And two things are really shocking in this. One is that when a woman dies, they don't say her number, which is your identity. They don't say her name. Men who die, like if a man grabs the wire, the electric wire to die, they will write his name and number down, right? Not women. So we have no idea how many women and girls died before mid-August 1942, and they arrive in March 1942. We have zero numbers on that, and there's no way to find out. And the other thing is that in December 6, 1942, they kill 10,000 women. They select 10,000 teenagers and women to die. And the SS records do not mention it. They mention 2,000 a couple of days earlier, but that 10,000 is not listed. And every single survivor I've ever spoken to, and male survivors who were in the camp at the time, witnessed it, wrote about it. Rudolf Verba, who escaped from Auschwitz, writes about it, but it's not documented. And I got challenged. I was like, you know, well, we don't know if we can say this, like in interviews and stuff, because we're not sure it's true. And I said, so who are you going to trust? The SS, the Nazis, who, you know, have a reason to lie, or are you going to trust the people who were there, the witnesses and the survivors, right? Um, and and that is, you know, I get very impassioned about this because I think truth is so important. And the fact is, especially when you look at Holocaust denial, um, people are really good at subverting the facts, and they forget, you know, who has something to gain in lying. It's not the survivors. It's the SS. It's the Nazis who have something to gain. They know what they did. I mean, you know, as awful as it all was, what they did to women is that much worse because they're women and girls.
And finally, you were also part of another series called uh, uh, Battlefield Live Streams and Interviews. It's on WW2 TV. You have written books also. Are there more stories that now you'd like to tell with another documentary, perhaps about World War II?
Um, you know, I haven't really thought about it. I'm so busy touring with this movie. Really, you know, filmmaking is tough. um, I can sit at my computer at my desk and write a book and nobody bothers me, and I get to walk my dog and my cat sits on my lap and I'm very happy. And filmmaking, you know, you not only have to raise money to do it and work with a lot of people, but it takes an enormous amount of energy and time. I'm old. I don't know if I have time. I spent 12 years on this film. And I'm going to be in my 70s if I do that again. So I love the medium, and I love the visual and the music. I used to be a dancer. I found that I found the music timing and the edit it is very much like choreography. I people think I tried to make a beautiful story. Even though we're talking about Auschwitz, the archive of women, these young women, these black and white photos that families have sent me for years. I just got 2 more photos, actually. I was in Israel a couple of weeks ago, and people came up and gave me photographs of their aunts who did not survive. So I'm trying to create um, a document of photographs of women who did not survive, girls that did not survive, so that we have their faces and we can see them. At the very end of the film, we have a roll of name. There's a list with 999 names on it, and it goes up the screen, and every single face behind that is a girl who did not survive the Holocaust and the transport. And so, I'm trying to create a memorial because I think it's so important that we recognize their place in history, especially because they've been ignored for so long.
Well, with that, I want to say thank you so much for talking to me, and all the best. And looking forward to watch the documentary 999, The Forgotten Girls, at the Red Lorry Film Festival here in Mumbai. Thank you so much, and all the best, Heather.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I
Thank,
appreciate it. Namaste.
thank you. Thank you.
Shalom.